right. Thank you, Keith. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining us here today. I'm happy to be a special guest and help out Career Development Services with their Friday noon Zoom. So my topic that I will be going over with you all is how to request a graduate school recommendation letter. And I have been in your shoes before myself. As a student who was going to get a master's degree, I did have to request some letters of recommendation for graduate school. So my PowerPoint here has some tips and tricks to help you through that process. So to start, I just want to provide for you all a brief overview and break it down into 4 easy steps. And that's what we'll be going through today. So I want to make sure that you all recognize first step would be to consider your options. Our second step would be to frame your request. The third step would be to make the request. And the fourth step would be follow up. And I'm sure, as we're continuing through and I go over these steps, it'll become a little bit more clear for you all because letters of recommendation are an integral part of many applications, and graduate school applications are no exception. They can help an admissions officer see beyond test scores and connect the dots about who you are and why you'll be a strong fit for their program. But I'm sure you're wondering, how can you ensure that the letter submitted on your behalf will impress these admissions officers and help you stand out from the crowd? And even though we all need to ask for letters of recommendation to apply to grad school, this process for getting letters can sometimes feel awkward. So getting the letters of recommendation can also be an uncertain process as well. So you may have some questions like, who should you ask for a letter of recommendation? How do you ask? What kind of information should you provide for these letter writers? So today we're going to explore some of the best tips for requesting a graduate school recommendation letter. And the first step that we want to recognize is for you to consider your options. So we want to make sure that you know the rules. When you're requesting a letter of recommendation, it may seem daunting considering how big of an impact it can have on your future. So before you navigate the way in which you ask for the letters, it's important to consider a few significant factors. For most graduate programs, you'll need 2 or 3 letters of recommendation. So be sure to carefully check the application guidelines for each graduate program you'll be applying to. And in addition, certain programs will specify if your letters of recommendation should be from an academic or professional source, which may include your manager or colleagues. So you'll want to take the time to understand exactly what each program is looking for before reaching out to recommenders. And you also want to make sure that you're choosing the right people. So you want to engage with someone who you've worked with directly for a meaningful amount of time, and someone who can speak to your specific strengths and describe how these strengths will serve you well in the graduate program. And after exploring the guidelines for letters of recommendation for your particular program, you want to view your options. So you may consider requesting a letter from a professor, a faculty member, a researcher, employer, mentor, or peer you've had a positive relationship with. Your professors are accustomed to being asked for letters of recommendation, and I'm sure they'll be happy to push you closer to your academic or career goals. So don't worry about asking. I know it seems a little bit stressful, but they really are there to assist. But you really do want to, before requesting for the professor to assist, ask yourself a couple of questions. So, does this professor know you by name? Are they familiar with your work? Have you performed well in their class? And have you worked with them outside of class? And have you always acted ethically and professionally in their class? If you can answer positively to all of those questions that I mentioned, then you have the right person to request for the letter of recommendation. And you really don't want a letter that says, you're just a hard worker, but one that demonstrates ways that you're a hard worker. Admissions officers really want to know how you'll benefit in their program. So you want a letter that will help bring that to life, and picking the right person to write that is going to really be helpful. A couple other tips: if you are currently enrolled in college, your letters of recommendation are likely going to come from 3 of your professors. More specifically, you ideally want to ask professors who are related to the field of your graduate program. For example, if you're applying for a master's program in engineering, then the professor in an art history class you took as an elective may not be the best letter writer for this occasion, even though they may know you really well. However, you do typically have 3 letters to acquire. And some of the professors who know you best may very well be from unrelated fields. If need be, it is okay to ask a professor from an unrelated field for a letter of recommendation if they are able to speak about skills you have that they believe make you a good fit for the field you want to go into. And then if you are currently not enrolled in college, so you're in the workforce, past professors may not be the clear choice for your letter writers. If you're applying to graduate school, you may have some professional contacts, such as your boss or mentor, who would be great candidates. They can speak to your work ethic, drive, and other skills, and they can provide qualities that will color your potential for success. A colleague may also be a good fit for a letter writer. And if you have a good relationship with a former professor, it doesn't hurt to reach out to them as well. All right, moving on to that next step. So next, you really want to frame that request. You want to be thoughtful in your approach. Writing a letter of recommendation is a big favor. So be assured that you approach asking from a respectful, formal, and graceful place. How you present your request for a letter is just as important as who you ask. So think through your plan for approaching your recommenders carefully, and always be sure to show your genuine appreciation for helping you. One way to kind of bridge this conversation is to ask for a brief meeting with them. And you can kind of walk them through how much you value your experiences working with them and how their input will be significant to your application and what you might hope to achieve in the graduate program. What's more, you want to be sure to clearly state in this conversation why you chose them specifically to write a letter for you. Maybe they helped you learn essential skills, or they inspired you to pursue a particular area of study. No matter the reason, they are more likely to feel connected to your request if they know there's been a lot of thought and time behind your decision. And it's really important that you make an in-person meeting for this conversation, if possible as well. If you can't do in-person, definitely aim for a video or phone call instead. Email is efficient, but it often leaves room for interpretation in messages. And this is an important ask. So you want to make sure the contact, your letter writer, knows exactly how important this is to you and how thankful you are for the consideration. And then you may have some professors that you ask that may just not have time to write the letter of recommendation. They have a lot on their plate at their current moment, or, they just don't have the capacity to do so. So you also want to make sure you provide an easy out for your recommenders. You don't want to get a letter that's lukewarm. That could actually do more harm than good. So to avoid this problem, you want to consider framing your request to potential recommenders in a way that gives them an opportunity to politely decline if they don't feel their insight will be impactful. So you want to ask if they would feel comfortable writing you a letter of recommendation that will highlight your particular strengths. That way, if they aren't someone who is likely to write a glowing recommendation, they have an opportunity to gracefully bow out. And if they do deny your request at this stage, consider it a gift. You'll still have an opportunity to find someone else who will write an impactful letter on your behalf, and you can avoid including a generic recommendation in your application. You also want to be considerate of their time. Professors and other professionals receive countless requests for letters of recommendation, so it's best to give them plenty of time to write yours. Generally, it's a good idea to ask for recommendations at least 1 month or more in advance of the application due date. You don't want to wait until a few days before the deadline on something that's this important. If possible, you may also want to build in some buffer time to your request and ask them to provide the letter a week or two before the actual deadline. That way, even if your recommender faces an unexpected obstacle or delay, you can still ensure your materials are submitted on time. All right, the next step, making the request. You want to set the stage. So you're going to help guide these recommenders to ensure each letter of recommendation explains how they know you and your work. You want to outline the ways in which they can anticipate you'll be successful in the program. And you want to provide specific examples that illustrate your top attributes. So you're going to make sure that you're providing them with everything that you need. For example, you may want to give them a bulleted list of highlights based off of that conversation that you had. It can be incredibly impactful, and it'll tie into not only what they know about you, but as well your work ethic to the specifics of the program that you're going to be applying for. And you want to make it easy for your recommenders. So provide any relevant information that they may need to craft this letter. So whether you're making that request in person or in writing, be sure to follow up. And you want to say, what does this include? So this next slide gives some examples of that when you're thinking, okay, what information does the recommender need? You'll want to send them this ahead of time. They may ask you even to provide some materials, but there are some resources that you should be able to send with your letter. So for example, you may want to put some classes that you've taken with the recommender, some experiences that you've shared. You want to provide a copy of your transcript as well as your resume, any research experiences and internships, awards and achievements, academic career goals, and relevant professional experience. If it's been a while since you've last had contact with the recommender, you'll also maybe want to send a little bit of background information that'll help make things easier. You'll want to include perhaps also your personal statement. If they'd like to read that, you can ask. They may not be able to, but it can be a big help to help them draft the letter by seeing what you've shared in that personal statement. Providing these materials up front will remind the reviewer of your most important skills. And some additional information in addition to the background information that they may need to know to help write the letter in a timely manner and target the letter as much as possible is when the application is due. You may also want to include a copy of the recommendation forms. So if you're applying to a specific school and they have forms for the recommender to fill out, you'll want to send those. You'll also want to include instructions for submitting the letter of recommendation. So are they going to be submitting a hard copy or sending a soft copy? Are you going to be turning in that letter of recommendation, or are they going to be sending it to the school directly? And then you want to also include any details about the program and the school that you're applying to. And then the next step, you just want to follow up. So you may want to review the letter in advance. If that's the case, you'll again just want to be polite in your request and ask the recommender if they can send you a copy of the letter before they submit it. It is understandable to be a bit shy about following up with recommenders. You don't want to pester them or bother them, but if you do it politely and appropriately, it could be an important step in ensuring the letters are written and submitted on time and they have the best reflection of you. By reviewing the letter in advance, you'll be able to see what they've written. You've had a little bit more control over the process. If it's not really hitting the points that you're asking for, this could be a great opportunity for you to tactfully ask if the recommender would mind making a few minor changes before sending in your letter. So just always remember, be polite, be receptive, and grateful for their time and energy throughout the process, and limit the requests, if you are going to request that they edit or rewrite, to 1 to 2 maximum. And then one more other important follow-up tip. Some programs do ask if applicants want to waive their right to review the recommendation letter submitted on their behalf. So be sure to consider whether or not you've chosen to waive this right before requesting the letter with your recommender. So if you have chosen to waive it and then you ask them to view a copy, that might be a little bit awkward because they would not be able to provide that since you chose to waive it. And then here are some more respectful reminders. If you haven't heard from the recommender as you get closer to the application deadline, it's a good idea to just make a polite inquiry several weeks before your application due date. So again, don't pester them, but just send like one gentle reminder to confirm that they're planning to write a letter and ask if they have any questions or points that you can provide some insight as they work. Hearing from you may prompt that they need to get to work, or they may actually follow up and ask for some further input. This opportunity to answer any follow-up questions may even allow for you to ask for a copy of the letter ahead of time. So that will help remove some of that awkwardness. And that will allow you to give some input and feedback during that writing stage as well. Finally, you want to share your success. Thank you note goes a long way. So you're going to send a note of gratitude as soon as the recommender writes your letter. And then also if you get into the program, you want to write to the recommenders, letting them know and thanking them for their role in your success. And I do have some additional tips. There have been some questions about asking for recommendation letters during COVID. So this process may be a little bit different because you may not have the opportunity to ask for things in person as much as you would before the pandemic. So it's really important to form a connection beyond the classroom, especially if your classes were taking place virtually and you're not having that opportunity to speak with the professor before or after class. Like you would in person, you may, just want to send a few emails here and there, reach out, just really show that you're interested in the class and take the time to get to know the professor. And just be as personal as possible in the request. We all have a lot going on in our lives and things are a little bit different right now with COVID. So just being respectful of their time and just really being polite and courteous with asking. Again, usually you would want to arrange a meeting in person for anyone who you want to write a letter of recommendation for you to speak about your plans for graduate school applications. However, because of COVID, meeting in person may not be feasible. So you can, again, try to meet via video chat or over the phone. You just really want to make sure that you make that connection. If email seems to be your best option due to the circumstances of the current pandemic, that's okay too. You just want to make sure that your professor is as comfortable as possible during this process, so that if they don't feel comfortable meeting in person, you may need to set up either a Zoom or a Skype or send them an email. And I did want to provide, just as an additional resource for you all, an example of what that email may look like. So it's pretty lined up for you, very professional. It outlines the school that you're applying to. You're just letting them know that you want them to write that letter of recommendation on their behalf. You'll make a note of the relationship between you and the recommender, their position either as your professor or someone who works with you, and listing some of your skills and qualifications for them to help highlight that background information. And just, again, being appreciative for, reaching out and possibly having them write this letter of recommendation for you, and providing all the pertinent information like the deadline for when it's due, attaching a copy of your resume, as well as the admission requirements, and then just signing it with your name and contact information. Do we have any questions I can answer for you all?
I have a question.
Yeah, hi, Janine.
So besides like a professor, who do you recommend to write recommendation letters?
I think, again, it would just really depend, if you're still in school currently or if you've graduated. Typically, if you are still in school, you do want those letters of recommendation to come from the professors, especially ones who are going to be in the academic fields that you're going onto the graduate program for. But of course, if that is not viable to get all three of your professors, then, if there's anyone else that's been a mentor to you on campus, that would be helpful as well.
Thank you.
Again, thank you all for joining us here today for the Friday Noon Zoom. It has been a pleasure for me to be a guest speaker here. Just always remember, if you all need any help with anything else, Career Development Services is here to assist. I know they're more than willing to help you all. Check them out on FGCU's website, and you can schedule appointments for resume writing, cover letters, interviewing skills, anything career related.